Joe Biden's immigration plans may benefit undocumented Filipinos once passed by Congress.
The Filipino-American has been appointed to the White House as liaison for the Office of Personnel Management. The USOPM, under the Biden administration, aims to build a federal workforce that reflects the diversity of America.
The cry for racial justice, some 400 years in the making, moves us. The dream of justice for all will be deferred no longer. To overcome these challenges, to restore the soul and secure the future of America, requires so much more than words. It requires the most elusive of all things in a democracy: unity.
Filipino-Americans make up the second largest population of Asian Americans in the United States and the biggest number of overseas Filipinos. In 2018, the American Community Survey estimates that there were more than 4 million Filipinos in the U.S. Nearly 1/5 are employed in healthcare. Filipino medical frontliners were also among the many casualties of COVID-19.
President Joe Biden is said to be a game changer for his welcoming stance on immigration, as his administration is seeing an increase in appointments of more Filipino-Americans in the White House. Will the Phil-Ams be able to influence U.S. government decisions and policies? We discuss in this episode of The Chiefs.
Welcome to this Thursday edition of The Chiefs. And of course, with us tonight is Robbie Alampay of One News here in the studio. And also with us online is Lucy Cruz Valdez, the head of News 5. Joining us in a while will be Ana Marie Pamintuan of the Philippine Star from the port area. Good evening and happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday.
Hi, Ed. Hi, Robbie.
At ang daming story ulit. Among them, the discovery in China of a new way of testing.
Mauna ka.
It's more reliable daw.
More reliable
it's
daw.
More reliable. More reliable than the typical swab test.
Pero hindi yan pwede sa mga drive-to, drive-by testing.
Pwede pa rin.
Nakikita natin na sa window lang ginagawa, hindi pwede yun.
Pwede pa rin yun.
Mas mahirap to.
Maybe people are wondering what we're talking about.
No, we're talking about anal swab test. Akala nyo yung nasal swab test masakit? In all seriousness, anal swab test, and they're saying they tested it on children.
Yeah.
Also, some teachers. And what the main basis of this new method is they're saying mas tumatagal yung samples, mas yung active detection.
Because there were some patients who tested negative in the nasal swab test who ended up testing positive in the anal swab test. Well, what a way to get confirmation.
But that must be the 0.1%, right? Because if you're talking about the RT-PCR, they say that has a 99%, right? So that must be the 1%, right?
But I don't know if they're doing
something about
I don't know if they're doing mass testing already.
Part, no? Because I remember even with the old mercury type thermometers, remember the anal ones were supposed to be the ones that were really spot on.
I don't seem to remember that.
Kasi hindi ka nagpalaki ng baby eh.
Okay. Good point there. Okay. Well, our segue queen is not here, so I suppose we have to do our segue ourselves. Okay. As we introduced a while ago, our topic for today is going to be, well, Filipino-Americans of course, in the U.S. and their possible role in the future of America in the next 4 years. And so joining us tonight, our first guest is Attorney Ollie Cantos IV of the advisory board. He's the vice chairman of the board of Persons with Disability Rights Group RespectAbility. He's also currently with the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights. And of course, Ms. Irene Bueno, co-founder and partner of consultancy firm NVG. She also served in the Clinton administration as special assistant to the president in the White House Chief of Staff's office and Domestic Policy Council. And she was also the senior advisor for the Filipino-Americans for Biden-Harris. Good evening, Attorney and Ms. Bueno. Thank you for joining us. I know you come from different time zones, but welcome to the Chiefs, and we're happy to have you with us.
Welcome.
Well, let me start off with this. It's been a week since President Biden took his oath of office, 2.5 months since the elections. Kamusta mga kababayan? Ang ating mga kababayan dyan sa Amerika, how are they? Are they united now? Are they still fragmented? Is there still a fissure between those who supported Trump and those who supported the President, Joe Biden?
There's actually there are actually two undercurrents that are happening right now. Of course, the Democrats are really excited about the election of President Joe Biden. And on the Republican side, there is a division here where there are those of us like me who from the beginning were supportive of the election results and who do not believe the election was stolen. And then there are others within the Republican side who believe still that the election was stolen and who are angry that the president, in their view, lost illegitimately. And so the divisions are still very real. But the thing that is really important here is that President Joe Biden is the president of the United States. There are Republicans who respect him as president, who accept him, Vice President Harris. And together in unity, we have got to move forward, and we've got to move away from these doggone conspiracy theories and actually accept the truth about how the election wasn't stolen and how we need to move forward as a country to support the administration in every way we can.
Irene?
And I just want to add that the country is still deeply divided. It's not going to change overnight, but I believe that President Biden and Vice President Harris is the leadership team that we need to recognize that these differences do exist and to try to bridge that divide and unite our country, because we are facing so many challenges, and without a united front, a united country, we will not be able to address these challenges.
I mean, Ms. Bueno, I mean, of course, we're talking about, I mean, every little bit of news that, Joe Biden's appointed a PhilAm, he's appointing more Asian Americans. We do recognize that, America being America, we want to acknowledge that America would prefer to be to not make a big deal about ethnicity and so on, that it's colorblind and so on. But at the same time, nobody can deny that coming out of the Trump administration, and given the rhetoric as well as the campaigns, the Biden administration is in fact actively sending a message of diversity and inclusivity, and that is in fact part of the campaign as well as the mission. But speak to that. I mean, given the fact that America wants to be the most idealistic it wants to be, at the same time having to actively be conscious about this diversity, inclusivity that you're trying to build.
Yes, I mean, I think from day one, President Biden has always said that his administration will look like America. And, you talked about some of the statistics before, and I think that is what his administration is trying to achieve. And not just anyone who has a certain diverse background, but people who are qualified. And you can see the people that he has already appointed and staffed in his White House. They are the top of the game. They've had a lot of experience. They are experts, and they also happen to be diverse. And I appreciate that he isn't, he makes sure that he casts a wide net to make sure that he is bringing in the best, because like I said, we're tackling some really difficult problems and we need our A team on the field.
You're both very, sorry, Mr. Cantos, you were saying something?
Well, what is really incredible about President Biden and Vice President Harris is that he knows the truth about how diversity needs to be considered, where it is not a matter of being colorblind. It's more a matter of looking at the reality of how there are people who are qualified from all backgrounds, regardless of color, religion, sexual orientation, disability, etc. And in the past, there have been times when the qualities of such folks have been overlooked. And so it's not to say that there's any sort of quota system or anything, but it's rather saying that in looking like America, the leaders who are part of the administration have to be a part of America in terms of being from every different segment of society, which then allows there to be the kind of representation of viewpoint and perspective that actually makes government stronger and makes the country stronger as a whole.
My question to you is, did you actually, or are you actually seeing a marked shift to more Filipino-Americans, for example, being given positions in government compared to when the Republicans were the majority, or when the president was Republican? Or was this something that evolved steadily over time, regardless of what the leadership was, party-wise?
Well, the Biden-Harris administration is just getting up and running. There are thousands of political appointments that, need to be made. And, as you saw, he sworn in, 1,000 last Wednesday. So we're just starting to see that. But I think that even starting with President Clinton, who I was an appointee for his administration, I think that's when we really saw the diversity really make a difference. And, just to Ollie's point, it is, you're not doing diversity just for diversity's sake. The people at the decision-making table bring with them their experiences, their diversity, and they bring that to the policy table so that you can make sure that our policies are reflective of all of America and are really the very best. Once this administration is completely filled out, I'm sure we will see that this is one of the most diverse administrations, and we'll see lots of Filipino-Americans throughout the administration. And I think that I know a lot of Filipino-Americans and many that are serving, but there are actually some that I don't know, which I think that's great. I think it just really underscores that they are casting a wide net to make sure they have the brightest and the best.
You'll understand, of course, that here in the Philippines, our kababayans are as much interested in the Biden administration and its stance towards this region and this country, as much as we're interested about Filipino-Americans in governance and politics in the United States. Let's go back to prior to the elections, because people were really intrigued. I mean, it's granted that there are Filipino Democrats and there are Filipino Republicans, but is there a particular characteristic or cause to the Filipino demographic in the United States that is common between Democrats and Republicans, and does that in any way provide any kind of a force or possible thing to build a force for the Filipino-Americans as a political sector in the United States?
That's a really good question. The fact is that there are Filipino Republicans and Filipino Democrats. The thing that unites us all is that we need to be involved and we need to be active, and we need to be extremely cognizant also about how, being a part of the rest of society, it is important for each of us to do our part to build together. There's so much rhetoric in Washington where people have become so polarized that I've personally witnessed friendships be destroyed by the political environment. Even though people come from different backgrounds, they all of a sudden aren't, not even suddenly, but they're just not speaking because everything is so vitriolic. That's why we've got to really do what President Biden has urged, which is to lower the temperature. There are people who are Republicans and Democrats who no matter what their background is, who really want to move forward. But unfortunately, just like the rest of society, people are politically divided. And that's why, in looking at the future with what's happening in this and future administrations, that we as a Filipino community, both there in the Philippines as well as all around the world, we have got to continue to unite based on our common heritage and our common love for our people. Because when we do that, we bring that into everything that we do. And one of the things that we get to pride ourselves on, which crosses party lines, is hard work and personal responsibility and embracing civil rights and loving our families and so forth. These are things that cross party lines. And even though it can be tempting to sort of look at the divisions among us, the thing that we also must do within our dialogue and discourse is literally to find areas of common ground that cross political lines. Like here in the United States, we're working on infrastructure, supporting employment, getting past this pandemic, etc. There's just a lot that we all have to do.
But Ollie, we have talked as well to Phil-Ams who feel very strongly, for example, about immigration on the very conservative side. I get what you're saying, that in the end we all want to work towards, for example, fighting poverty, fighting the pandemic, and those of course are goals. But of course, in the end, we will have to talk about how to get to those goals, and doon nagkakaiba, doon nagkakatalo, and the devil really is in those details. You have served several administrations, both Republican and I suppose Democratic as well. What about what do you think could be, going back to Robbie's question, what do you think could be a common ground for PhilAms, not just in terms of goals, but also in terms of I don't know, policy or strategy?
Well, there needs to be an opportunity for everyone in the United States, including Filipino-Americans, to have a pathway to citizenship. Because in this country, broadly speaking, there are 11 million undocumented immigrants, and we can't have them relegated to the shadows. That is something that we all need to embrace. Because what would be the solution? To just have them just work in the shadows and not be accepted, when the reality is that immigrants are the lifeblood of this and every country, where that's something that when people, especially including on the Republican side, where we have talked about hard work and everything, this is an opportunity by supporting immigrants and being able to have them go to work and have them contribute to society at every level, and to have them for them to have a way for them to strive for and attain American citizenship, so that they can really move forward in that regard. There are disagreements in terms of that, but that's something that we all need to embrace, because all of us need to have that opportunity to grow and shine, including within this context.
Irene, but Irene, before you go in, let me introduce Ami Pamintuan, one of our co-hosts, going live from the port area in Manila. I'm sorry, from the Philippine Star offices in Manila. Ami, welcome back to the Chiefs.
Good evening. Sorry I'm late.
Okay, Irene, please, your thoughts.
Yeah, there's a story today that we're following about the threat, the serious threat of armed violence against the Biden administration. How are you coping with this on your end? How are you dealing with this?
You know, it's been a really, honestly, living in Washington, D.C., it has been a difficult 4 years. We see, on the streets of D.C., a lot of division. And of course, during the insurrection earlier this month, and then following that, the inauguration, we did feel like we were in a war zone. I have a 17-year-old daughter, and I have to assure her that we're safe and that our foundation of this country is strong, and we will, we will survive. But it is difficult. I think that this administration, as you've seen this morning, that they are on top of this. They are going to make sure that we are protected both from enemies, foreign and domestic. They are. This hasn't been done before, where there have been different levels of danger identified from domestic threats, and so I feel good. I can sleep at night that that this administration is taking this very seriously. But yes, I have to say, as a parent living in Washington, D.C., I do worry that my daughter will go out and there could be something that happens. So I, tell her, don't go down by the White House, don't go to the Capitol, stay close by. I need to know where you are. And there continues to be a National Guard presence here in DC. So it's less than the inauguration last week, but definitely a presence. So it's a reminder every single day that we are at this point in our country.
Mr. Cantos, are you finding it necessary to arm yourselves?
Well, it's really sad that things have deteriorated this way. This all needs to, I'll just say this really directly, violence needs to be condemned in every way and without apology. This is just unacceptable. This has never happened like this way in our modern history, and it just needs to be condemned from all quarters, including from Republicans, because it's awful. I just don't remember ever a time of such vitriol where the legitimacy of our government has been questioned because of what has been said about the election being stolen. It has set into motion, bringing to bear the awful forces of violence and white supremacy and racism and things that are happening now. It's just awful, and it is difficult. In the DC area, folks are having to be vigilant, and this is just unprecedented. But it's also good that we are prepared appropriately. But this goes right back to the things that we've been talking about earlier about the need to lower the temperature. But the key here is for us to condemn this sort of violence or threat of violence. This is absolutely not acceptable. It's just not under any circumstance.
Certainly. We have that every 6 years in the Philippines. It's just surprising to see it there.
But here, I'll have to go back to the Filipino pride. People like you make news here in the Philippines because you know how Filipinos count the number of Filipino-Americans who hold very powerful positions in the U.S. government and stuff like
Or
that.
get into Americans Got Talent.
Yes, exactly that too. but I want to ask
We'll cheer you on wherever you are.
Yes, that's right. Well, my question is, when you're in your positions in government, do you set aside a certain effort of yours, a special effort toward pushing advocacies that will benefit Filipino-Americans or even Filipino wannabe Americans, whether directly or indirectly? I just wonder if there's that kind of a unified effort.
I think we sometimes in DC talk about the inside game and outside game, where if you're on the inside, you're at the decision-making table, and it's sort of incumbent on you to advocate for your community, but not just because you're doing it for a self-interested reason, but because it'll make the policy better. If they're not aware of the impact of immigration policy that impacts Filipino-Americans or the Filipino-American nurses and and just bringing that to the table, it's really your responsibility. But also we do get pressure and advocates from outside who tell us what's important to the Filipino-American community. So bringing that information to the policymaking table. So I think that's one of the benefits to having diversity at the table, is because you're bringing those experiences. If you say, I'm going to leave my Filipino-ness at the door, you're just going to bring the same level of issues and perspectives that others bring, and that they really want you there because you have a different experience.
Well, in the case of Mr. Cantos, you're not only representing Filipino-Americans, you're also wonderfully representing the disabled sector. And your adoption of your 3 sons who are also visually impaired, and how far they've come in their lives because of your help. I mean, what exactly do you do to influence policy towards these sectors that you have picked up as your advocacies?
Thank you, Luci. I have been in the disability rights space for 30 years, literally from 1990 consecutively all the way through now, holding positions both in the nonprofit sector and in the government sector. And the thing that I love talking about is how we, as people with all types of disabilities, should have the opportunity to give and grow and to love and learn just like everybody else. It is really important for people to recognize that the characteristic of disability does not need not define the whole of who we are. It's just a part of who we are. But we as a community need to strive hard for standards of high standards of excellence. Like my mom, who's off camera here, she actually has been amazing from the time I was little, where I wanted to get out of doing chores because I can't see. And I'd say, I can't clean something. And she'd say, then use your hands, feel it. And she'd literally make me fix the bed exactly properly, bounce a quarter off the bed to make sure it's completely flat, etc.
Bounce a quarter off the bed. That's so military.
Yeah. I need this, like military, I need this to be done and you need to do it right. And it's not a failure on this or anything else. It's simply not an option. And so when other people are saying, oh gosh, give him a break, he's blind, she'd say, well, so he's blind, so what? That doesn't have anything to do with how he still has responsibilities to this house and to do his chores and to work hard and to get good grades, etc. So I attribute it principally to my mom and to my dad and my loving sister, etc. So when it comes to the disability community, we are all a part of this discussion too, on the political front, the social front, as well as striving for advancement. And I love how the Filipino values that have been instilled in me and growing up have literally influenced every part of my life, both within my work as part of government, as well as in my nonprofit work and in my faith community.
Okay, well, we're speaking with Ollie Cantos and Irene Bueno. They're both obviously right now in the United States, both coasts. But we'll just need to take a break. Please stay with us. The Chiefs will be right back.
Got to work immediately after being sworn in as the 46th President of the United States.
And I pledge this to you. I will be a president for all Americans.
There's nothing that we need more than real leadership, and I'm glad that today, on January 20th, we can finally call him President Biden.
We've learned again that democracy is precious. Democracy is fragile. And at this hour, my friends, democracy has prevailed.
Welcome back to the Chiefs here on One News. We're now in the final stage of our conversation. We're still with Attorney Ollie Cantos IV, Advisory Board Vice Chair of the Persons with Disability Rights Group, RespectAbility, and former White House official, Ms. Irene Bueno. Irene, you've had experience in the White House, and now, you know, as we said earlier, all Filipinos are jumping out of their seats with every news of every appointment. That's, you know, baka kamag-anak ko, baka pinsan ko yan, maybe my cousin, and so on. But we're proud enough for every kababayan that's there. I was looking at some memes and some posters that came out of Filipinos getting elected everywhere from Daly City to Hawaii to Virginia, even Utah. I saw something. And one of the names that really made the rounds over here was, you know, the news of Jason Tenko, White House liaison for the Office of Personnel Management. Just a quick question, Irene, if you could. What does the Office of Personnel Management do?
Oh, well, you know, the government has many career employees. There's both political appointees, which Jason is, which is they're selected by the White House, and then there are career, many thousands of career employees that work in the government regardless of who is president. So he is the White House liaison at the Office of Personnel Management, OPM, that, you know, that sets policies on who gets hired in career positions. And those positions are so important, like I said, because they continue on regardless of who is president. And so he will have an opportunity to ensure that the Office of Personnel Management will be diverse in terms of its appointments. That's what they're responsible for, is making sure that the appointments are diverse and reflect the president's principles and ideals. There's also other people that have been appointed. Minnie Timaraju, who I know, and she is working on the diversity. So she's specifically focused on that, but not just in terms of appointments, but really government-wide. So you can already see that the President Biden really wants to make sure that people are in place, both as appointees, but also long-term, that will ensure our government will be diverse and stand up to the ideals that America's based on.
Okay, now I
Does
wanted...
having more Filipino-Americans in government also open up opportunities for work for Filipinos here? I mean, I'm sure
Yes.
that's what many Filipinos have in mind to ask, really.
And
What is the
can we get
advantage
their
to us?
can we get their email addresses?
Well, you know,
What do
I've
you
never
think?
been I've been a political appointee, so I'm not as familiar with the career process, but actually, Ollie
That's
may
just
be able to-
Robbie asking, okay? But
Nagkakalaglagan
the
na.
rest of our viewers, I'm sure their interest is really, what does this mean when there are more Filipino-Americans in very critical government positions? Does this really mean that they're going to push for, more liberalization of immigration for Filipinos, more H1, HB visas, or whatever you call it, H1B and H1A, whatever. What does this really mean? And does this really equalize the field for Filipinos? And not just consign them to jobs in agriculture or even just, in the service sector.
I think that that is a good question, and the fact that Irene has risen to the level of prominence that she has, and I admire her a lot. That's reflective of what is possible for all of us as Filipinos across the world. You're right, we should not be relegated to, not even relegated, because people who are maids and those in the service sector and in the food sector, those are all important jobs. However, it can't be just those jobs. We have every ability to rise to the highest levels of leadership in government, in the private sector, and in the nonprofit sector. And so, as various of us reach higher levels of leadership, what we bring with us is who we are as Filipinos, and that means that we can be on the lookout for supporting others being included. And so within, Irene talked about the Office of Presidential Personnel on the political side. I've been a presidential appointee myself on 2 separate occasions, and I can tell you in supplementing that, there's a website, usajobs.gov, where there are positions where they're hiring for the federal government. But for us, United States citizenship is required. But there are also opportunities for people to serve as federal contractors. And so if they work for a federal contractor, then that's a way that they can potentially serve. And there are different requirements depending on what the specific provisions are with specific contracts. But there are ways for Filipinos to be involved in government as well as in the nonprofit and private sector. And that is what is so wonderful. And I really love how you pointed that out, how all of us need to move into various positions at every level throughout society, because it's really, really important for us.
Yeah, Irene, I wanted to ask. I mean, we're interested, of course. You understand about. We keep bringing up influence and representation, not just. I didn't say not just for the sake of Filipino-Americans and your own issues and challenges and aspirations in America, but as Filipinos, we also want to know what might this mean for us, for the homeland, for the Philippines. I was looking through the Asia Society Policy Institute, came up with some policy briefings and some policy recommendations. And among them, for example, was re-engage with Southeast Asia. Asia Society said, you need to provide an alternative to Belt and Road because really we've lost our footing and our influence in this part of the world, which of course includes the Philippines. That's part of where the interest is coming from. Does this diversity and inclusion also come hopefully with some hope of bringing America back to its, to its leadership role and to its role and to what in the foreign policy that people hope would somehow provide some balance back here in the region and in our country, for that matter.
I think you can see that President Biden and Kamala Harris have appointed people who are well known in the world, who have experience working diplomatically with countries throughout the world. And, we trying to signal that we are back. We want to be engaged with the entire world. We want to, reclaim our leadership position in the world, and that you can count on us to work with all of you. So I think it will make a difference. I think Asia is an area that is of particular interest to this administration, and that we'll see more engagement with the entire world, and not just not making America first and ignoring the rest of the world. That we will be real partners. And COVID, I think 19 is the first challenge that the entire world is dealing with, and I think that we'd like to be a leader on that challenge.
Miss Bueno, we're proud of you, not only because you're Filipino-American, but also because you're a woman. And of course, one notable aspect of the Biden presidency is his running mate, his vice president, first woman, first woman of color, first Black woman. I know you're working with women's groups, and I'd like to know participation of Filipino-American women in the political arena in the U.S. Well, what's the situation? Is there an increasing number of Filipino-American women running for public office? I think the question really is, magkakaroon din ba tayo ng Kamala Harris?
So I also want to point out that Vice President Kamala Harris also is half Asian. Her mother was from India. Mm-hmm. So I like to point that out. And also, she and I went to the same law school. She was a year behind me. We weren't best friends, but we knew of each other. So I have special, pride that she is the vice president. But I think she really is. And I had a chance to introduce her at an event. And I told her that, you really are a role model for my 17-year-old daughter, who now sees that if Kamala Harris can be vice president, that or even maybe president, that really she can do anything. And the vice president always talks about how her mother said, "You may be the first at many things, but you should not be the last." And she repeats that many times. So I think that many times maybe people will get to a certain level and don't look behind them. But I think that she has really shown the example that we need to continue to bring other people through that glass ceiling or through that door. And so as far as Filipino-American women, mentioned that I was part of Filipino-Americans for Biden-Harris. And Melissa Ramoso was one of the co-chairs, and there were many, many amazing Filipino-American women, younger women, people from Georgia, all over the country, who really took leadership positions and, really impressed many of us and really, made sure that Filipino-Americans came out to vote, as well as in states, like I said, in Georgia. So I think that there is this, I think people are inspired that there are opportunities to really grow and to be leaders. So I do hope that more Filipino-American women will say, I want to throw my hat in the ring. I want to run for office, and I will do whatever I can to support those efforts. But it's scary. It's daunting. And, at least in the U.S. system, you have to raise a lot of money. You have to know a lot of people in order to run sometimes and be successful. So that can be daunting, but I think that some of the Filipino-American women will do that, and I hope to see more in the future.
What about you? Are you interested in politics?
Oh, of course. My whole life is politics. Yes. But I because I've been doing this for so long, I feel like I have a lot of experience, and I like to be kind of behind the scenes and promote some people. I was very fortunate to spend almost 8 years in the Clinton administration, and it was an amazing experience. And I want to try to get more Filipino Americans in that position, like a Jason, to have that experience as well. So that's what I see my one of my roles is, and also, like I said, encourage people to consider running for office.
Well, a question for both Ollie and Irene. Irene pointed out a while ago that you can't really leave your Filipino-ness by the door once you get in. But there's also, you might also say that there's another side to that. On a theoretical or hypothetical level, for example, Filipino-American, a Chinese-American, or a Pakistani-American, even a Russian-American, how does it go if you get higher up in rank? Does it ever come to the, or could it ever come to the point where you might have to make a difficult choice between your adopted land and well, the land you come from, especially if there seems to be a conflict sometimes in terms of the policy of your adopted land versus the policy of your old homeland? How does that go?
In short, will you be American first or Filipino first? I guess in a situation like that. Yeah, Mr. Ollie, yes.
Oh, sorry. I don't see the conflict there because being Filipino and being American, it's part of who we are, and it's in looking at that. We embrace that, and I embrace that as a Filipino-American. It's not like, well, I'm Filipino or I'm American. I'm both, and so I actually think that being a Filipino-American helps inform what I do to support Filipinos in the way that I would support people of all races and all backgrounds. It's a matter of it's not necessarily a matter of conflict. It's actually a matter of synergy. Because we each know, all of us here, look at all of you as accomplished journalists. You with your respective careers have represented the best and the brightest. And the same is true here with us in the United States. There are little boys, little girls, young men and young women who want to do what Irene has done or what I've done or what others have done. And it's the power of inspiration that really drives it all. And that inspiration also does inform policy. Because in the same way that we've been able to move ahead in spite of challenges and in spite of any limited beliefs or stereotypes about us based on whatever the different classifications are, the fact is that because we've made it, we have a responsibility to show others behind us how to do it too. Because when we do that, we're all stronger. And that's not just rah-rah or kumbaya talk, it's the truth. Yeah. I'm sure that Irene has done that within her sphere and continues to build her influence. And I, on my end, work to do the same. And I love our Filipino-American community. I love Filipinos around the world because we all share the love of life and we all know what we can do. And even if others may not know what we can do, look out world, because we're going to keep coming and we're going to keep striving to have higher and higher positions, bringing people along the way, and making sure that everybody strives for excellence, which then builds the momentum still stronger.
Mm-hmm. Well, I asked that question because two countries, I suppose, could have differing and contrasting policies, but they could still be both right. And at least on a theoretical level, that could happen. I was just wondering, would that be a difficult position to have to handle? Or have you ever come across something like that, or never?
I was in the Clinton administration, while I would say I probably agreed with 99% of the policies, there were definitely, we had, really big fights around policy, but you didn't get to see that, right? We were behind doors fighting with each other. Yeah, fighting with each other. That's how it should be, right? Yeah. So we're fighting, we should propose this. No, we shouldn't do that, and in the end, there was one policy I didn't necessarily agree with, but I did appreciate that I was at the table and was able to make my argument. Mm-hmm. But in the end, at least if you're part of an administration, then you either, some people might say, okay, I didn't win, I'm quitting, which some people did do that. Mm-hmm. Or you say, you know what, I didn't win this time, but I'm going to keep fighting and maybe I'll win the next time. Yeah. And so it's you're part of a team, but you come out, unified after. But, there are definitely debates. It's not like proposals come out and they're, someone has an idea and it's written down and everybody agrees. There's a lot of work that goes into it and a lot of fights, but it's just important that we are there at the table to raise issues. And so that's why I think we all work so hard to make sure that there are Filipino-Americans at the table, whether it's, in the White House, on Capitol Hill, in state governments, just everywhere where they have impact on policy.
Irene and Ollie, beyond the Biden administration, beyond any administration, beyond even, as you said, the need and power there might be in uniting Filipino-Americans, I'm curious about, Ollie mentioned Filipinos rising all over the world. So beyond the Phil-Am community, how do we bridge the Phil-Ams with Filipinos here, back here in the Philippines, whether it's in terms of business or the common challenges we all have to bounce back in our economies, and all our shared aspirations? How do you think we can, on both sides, on all sides, do better in bridging Filipino-Americans, or for that matter, Filipinos all over the world, with Filipinos here in the Philippines?
Well, I love the question because it actually is a multi-tiered response. We need to start by looking at our own families and not only providing remittance to people back home in the Philippines, but also mentoring them even remotely and showing them the methodology, because there's a mindset for success that crosses all boundaries, and whether the boundaries are geographic or ethnic or whatever. If we can show people, and we do, by anybody who reaches out to us to say, I need somebody to mentor me. How does this work? How do these systems work? So we need to arm people individually with knowledge. We need to show them the principles of success. And then we need to find ways to work with them in a business context. Within my personal capacity, I have different businesses, one of which actually the company I'm with has ties to the Philippines. So I want to build with folks there. There are other friends who I have who are in the DC area who actually have call centers and things where they're building businesses and hiring people in the Philippines to work for people here in the United States. We could talk about that too. I mean, there are all sorts of ways, but the bottom line is that we need to each do our individual part. It isn't simply enough for us to make broad statements of principle, but we need to do it within our individual lives by helping people personally, but also looking systemically about how we can support one another with nonprofit and private sectors by looking for specific opportunities. And that's how beyond talk, we actually move forward through action to actually help one person, then the next. But we should also tell those individuals, in order to magnify our power as a community, we need to say, okay, we're showing you how to do this, but you need to do that for the next one and the next one. And then you need to come back to me, tell me what partnerships you're building, so that way we can loop that in. We create this sort of loop that then results in more success for all of us. That's really how it works.
It's kind of like a pay it forward, but let me ask you, since you're saying that you have to do it also individually, may I know whether you think that you'll be able to pass on the torch to the next generation, or will the next generation after you be more American than Filipino? Because especially because in this technological age, I mean, the whole globe is actually one nation, literally. I'm wondering how much of the culture is actually getting passed on, or maybe fading. I don't know, but yeah.
It depends on each family, but it's important, and that includes not only learning our cultural dances and learning to understand and speak Tagalog, and it also includes being involved in the Filipino community wherever we are, Filipino-American, Filipino, wherever, name the country. And that includes being involved with organizations that serve the Filipino community and staying tied in and not just talking about it. That also includes when there are new generations, like my children are Colombian born, but you ask them, they say we're Filipino. And but they say they're Filipino, and because by adoption they are. And so it's not Filipino. Being Filipino is not just a country of origin. I said it as a people.
Irene.
Yeah, Irene.
I mean, it's difficult. When I grew up in California, there were a lot of Filipinos, and my family was there. It was easy to be in touch with my Filipino-ness, but when I first moved to Washington, D.C., there's small pockets of Filipinos in certain areas, but it was harder to stay connected. But there are more Filipinos now here in the DC area, or we call it the DMV, District of Columbia, Maryland, Virginia. So it's easier now that my daughter, who is half Filipina, and to kind of teach her about Filipino-ness. And while my family is in California, before the pandemic, we were in California for all our big fiestas and parties with our extended family, several times a year. Unfortunately, we can't do that now, but I feel fortunate that she feels connected to being Filipino and to the family, and particularly to the food. Many more Filipino-American restaurants in DC now. When I first moved here, it was very difficult to find any, but there's one just probably a mile away. So it's been great, but it's a challenge. It really is. I don't speak Tagalog. I can understand some Tagalog and Ilocano, but I don't speak, so it's hard. But I try.
Well, I'll follow up Luci's question. I think among the younger generations, are there a lot of them who might want to settle in the Philippines? Seeing the developments here, I think you're following what's happening here. That will be the best indicator of where their hearts lie, I guess. Would you know if there are significant numbers of younger Filipino-Americans who are interested at least in visiting the country regularly? Because as far as I know, my cousins who are living there are not interested at all.
I guess I'll take that. I think that there is some interest. My daughter did get a chance to go, but we haven't been in a while. It's just, at least from the East Coast, it's much more difficult to visit. The best time of year is during December, and it's sometimes can be challenging to get there. But I think she is interested in going back and visiting again, maybe after post this pandemic. But obviously now it's just much more challenging.
Ollie, what about you, Ollie?
Well, I've been back to the Philippines 4 times, and my boys can't wait to visit the Philippines for the first time. And so, at least for speaking from our family, there's high interest. I also remember the Philippine Retirement Authority there, and they were enticing me to buy a condo there. And
Yes, you would. Yes, you would.
Yes.
Right.
And so,
It's a great retirement place, though. Yes, not much would say.
Yeah, I've heard, and I've actually been looking into those possibilities. So it isn't just that, but it's also just a wonderful coming home, because I still have relatives in the Philippines, and plus with my own family heritage on the Cantos side, my lolo was a congressman in Batangas there back in the 60s.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so he Ollie Cantos was there, and then on my mom's side, my lolo there was a businessman and everything, and so it's just, there's a lot of emotional tie to the Philippines, and it's exciting to see the development over more recent years, because I remember going there in 1980, 87, and then in the 2000s, and there have been so many amazing changes, and I'm always excited when I watch the rate of exchange change, because now I think it's down for every dollar it's now 52 pesos, I think. But I mean, so the peso seems to get stronger over time, which means that we're becoming more economically competitive too, which is exciting stuff.
Okay. Well, Ollie, it looks like you might have a dynasty here, if you come back. Well, we'd like to say thank you very much to Attorney Ollie Cantos VII. and Irene, are you also an attorney?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yes, I don't practice.
Yeah, but you're still an attorney. Attorney Irene Bueno, we'd like to say thank you very much. And I suppose I can speak for everybody here when you say we're proud of what you're doing and what you have done and what you will do.
Thank you. Mabuhay kayo.
Mabuhay kayo.
Mabuhay. Maraming salamat.
Thank you and good morning.
Thank you.
Yes. All right. Salamat. Thank you.
Okay, that was Attorney Irene Bueno and Attorney Ollie Cantos VII from Washington and California. And that will be all for this special edition of The Chiefs. We hope to discuss here. We'll keep the conversation going. I'm Ed Lingao.
I'm Mami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5.
I'm Robbie Alampay, and we are One News.